Welcome to Paranormal Almanac with your host, Kurt Sandvik. That's right, I'm your host, Kurt Sandvik, and on this week's edition of Paranormal Almanac, let's talk some more about time slips. But first, as always, we have the shout-outs. Shout-outs going out to the patrons. Shout-outs to Leviathan, The Wicked One, Scott Mills, It'll Said, Brian, Heather G's, Jeffrey B, Scott Thiessen, Johnny the Pommy, Hey Howdy Hi, Matt Lord, JT, Doogie Whore, Mike G, Tracy B, Ryden, Jeff, hey howdy hi buddy, Wayne, Rich, oh Jeff, let me know when you get the other shirt. It's supposed to be, it's on its way. Hopefully you've got it already. Wayne, Richard, Charles, Lori, Alec, Roger, Kimberly, Karen, Ethan, Sylvester, Duran, Cobalt Slayer 42, Lori, Alicia, Rebecca, Esteban, Orlando, Steve, and Stephen Scher, hey howdy hi, Jane Ann, hey howdy hi, Jennifer, Heather G, your friendly neighborhood skinwalker, Zuzus, what's it, Paula, Rick, Nico Scher and the Mouse, Andrew, Paul, Mark and Tina, Tortuga, Hanniboo, Mike from Jersey, uh-oh, I lost my place, hold on, the Zuzus, what's it, Nico Scher, Mark, Tortuga, Jay Bizzle, Andy, Tracy, Virginia Mailman, Tony the Magician, hey howdy hi buddy, Jason, Vicky, Crow, Lobita Works, Glacier Main, Isabel, Jen, Stacy, Amber, Tracy, Kelly Joe, Menace the Beast, Kick-Ass Magic, Robot Webcomic, Sandy, Paige, Couch, Bentman666, Scott, Andrea, Melody, Vanessa, Marisol, Becca, Jake, Charlotte, and the Beasties, Elizabeth, Sherry, hey howdy hi, special thank you in a minute, Art, Tim, Kenneth, Alexandra, George, Zozo the Demon, Hayden, Cindy, Ashley, Carrie, Robin, Will, Lauren, Russell, Isabel, Audra, Dorian, Cindy, Paula, Jerry, Jeff T. Joe, Lawrence, Melissa, Lauren, Veronica, Autumn, J. Mark, Carolyn, Jaden and Ashley, Todd, Jamie, and Elijah Hendrickson. Saw 2 of the 3 of them the other night. Dan, Laura Pitts, and Gamer Fan. With some very, very special shout-outs to Sherry, to Tracy, to Jeff, to Sarah. Who else am I blanking on? I'm blanking on somebody's name, and it's driving me crazy. I should have wrote them all down, Kurt. Special shout-outs to them. Special shout-outs to everybody that donated to help me buy the camera that I so desperately need to do the web show that I want to do, the YouTube show that I want to do. It's been purchased, but the camera's on back order. Womp, womp. But it's okay. Even though the camera's on back order, it's on its way. And I am so thankful to everybody that pitched in and helped. Obviously, 2 special shout-outs. Also, to Joe Teague and to my boy Stitch. Lots to get to. Just to give you a heads up, this is going to be a longer episode, but for the patrons, it's going to be even longer. That's right, the patrons are going to get the full episode. I'll tell you when and where, what's been cut out for the regular listeners, but for the patrons, you get the full, even longer, extra long edition of this week's episode, because this is a topic I really, really love. Time slips. I'll talk about it in a minute. But first, we should get right into paranormal news.
Ghosts and demons that haunt the night. Strange objects fly through the sky. Shadow people are spending the night again. Black-eyed children knock on my door. A portal to hell opens in my room. The time travel man says the world is changing soon.
Don't fucking shoot Bigfoot. That's right. It's been a while since I did a Don't Fucking Shoot Bigfoot episode. I got to put that up higher up on the list. I know I got a couple in the works, but expect one of those fairly soon. Pardon me. All right, the first story in paranormal news. They're back. That's right. The iconic Poltergeist house is up for sale for the first time in 45 years. It's a 2,300 square foot detached single-family home at 4267 Roxbury Street in Simi Valley. It's listed for $1.17 million. If you're a fan of this show, you will know that, like, my mom took me to go see Poltergeist when I was probably too young. It was like the first real horror movie that I ever went to. Prior to that, horror movies to me were like, Abbott and Costello meet the werewolf or Frankenstein or whatever on like Sunday morning TV, So nothing even remotely scary by whatever, 10 years old or whatever I was. And then my mom was like, well, let's take him to go, let's go see Poltergeist and break him. Did it probably fuel my love for paranormal investigations and ghosts? Oh, God, yeah. Did it also give me an unruly fear of trees and clowns? Oh, God, yeah. Well, that house, the Poltergeist house where they did the filming, is up for sale. I will say, though, the front of the house, the inside of the house, all looks exactly Poltergeist house. But the backyard, damn, they did some good work on the backyard since that house was sucked into oblivion. I mean, it's got a huge-ass backyard, really nice pool. I assume they got rid of all of the skeletons and the dead bodies and stuff before they put in this very nice pool. But maybe that's why they did the backyard the way they did. They were like, we got to dig up all of the gravestones and the dead bodies. Look, I know it's not real. I know it's just a movie that they happened to shoot at this house. Don't worry. I have not lost my mind, but just go with me. So they got a big-ass backyard, big pool, gorgeous house. My guess is there won't be any open houses just because everybody in the world that can get to Simi Valley would get to Simi Valley so they could walk through the house, so they could go like, this house is clean, or they're here in front of the TV and put their hands on the TV and, you get handprints and all that crap. So I'm assuming there isn't going to be any open houses. I'm also assuming that Zach Baggins will buy it out from under everybody and then do something dumb with it, or film an episode and then destroy the house probably. But it's up for sale if you got the money, and if you do have the money and you happen to be in Simi Valley and you go to an open house and you want to invite Kurt so he can go through it and live the first trauma he ever remembers having, I would love to go. I'd love to go to the open house with you. If you've got the credit that you can get us into an open house, because I sure as hell don't. They would be like, all right, let's run your credit. You can't walk in. In fact, you have to pay us for running your credit, because come on. Yeah, if you have the ability to get into an open house at the Poltergeist house and you want to invite me along, I'll come hang out with you. I'll give you free stickers and stuff. It'd be a blast. But yeah, speaking of haunted houses, up next in paranormal news, this one, they didn't write to me. They didn't ask me to do this. They're not paying me in any way, shape, or form. I just stumbled across this thing called the Boyd House, the haunted Boyd House. And I went, wow, this actually seems really, really freaking cool. They're located in southwest Minnesota in the small town of Boyd. Now, it's not for sale, but you can do private overnight paranormal investigations there. Private being the key word. It's 145 miles southwest of the Twin Cities. They offer private overnight stays at a real haunted house. So apparently this house was, not apparently, it says the history. History of the house is the Eckhart family, Fred and Minnie Eckhart, moved into the house in 1912. He was a well-respected businessman. He owned the General Dry Goods Store. Justice of the Peace, served on the school board, fire department, church board, helped build the Lutheran church. Unfortunately, 2 of their children passed away in the house. Minnie passed away in the home in 1955. Her funeral was held in the living room. That was pretty common in the 50s. Fred passed away in the home in 1958. There's been evidence captured that suggests they're still there today. Many people have had weird experiences at the Boyd House, including audible voices and EVPs, shadows and apparitions, doors and cabinets opening and closing, footsteps being heard, touching, objects being moved, and paranormal equipment interaction. So yeah, they're not asking me to plug this. I just saw this. I came across it and I went, that's cool as hell. So if you happen to be in Minnesota, you can go to BoydHouse217.com. Boyd, B-O-Y-D, BoydHouse217.com. Let me know if you guys stay there. Really, honestly, let me know, because it seems really, really cool. I'd like to do, oh wow, the cost is cheap, man. Cost for an overnight is $225. That covers up to 8 people. Wow, it's really, really cheap. Yeah, there are days that are already booked and blacked out, but, basically every Friday and Saturday in October, but just the Fridays and Saturdays. The rest of them, not so much. Ooh, even though Halloween is already booked, October 30th isn't. I still think this is way, way cool. Check it out, BoydHouse217.com. Alrighty, up next in paranormal news. UFO sightings in Palmdale and Lancaster. That's right, people have been yelling at me on Facebook. Not yelling, but shouting loudly on Facebook, like, Kurt, you know anything about it? Yeah, I looked into this the other night. I even briefly TikToked about it. TikTok, what's that? Don't worry, I'll tell you more in a minute. Yeah, there's something weird going on in Palmdale and Lancaster. Now, a few of the videos that I saw are drones or police helicopters, sure, but there are some that I can't explain. So I have a feeling something's going on, and then people in the area are having some fun with what's going on with their own drones. But residents of Palmdale and Lancaster, California, reported UFO sightings, sharing their experiences on the Ring Neighbors app, and local authorities have started investigating these weird claims. One resident described seeing a shooting star that zigzagged in the sky. Shooting stars don't do that. The sightings have sparked curiosity and discussion in the community. Authorities are looking into the validity of these reported sightings. One resident said, "Me and my daughter were hanging out in the backyard. We both thought we saw a shooting star falling east. It stopped very abruptly and zigzagged going north." Let's see. Here's some more personal sightings. You guys, I saw a UFO. I was walking my dog in my backyard and saw a bright light up in the sky. At first I was like, oh my God, what a cool plane that Northrop assembled. But to my dismay, it was a hovercraft. Please tell me I'm not the only one. I was intrigued by the first neighbor who posted they saw a UFO from his yard. So my mom and I went out to ours to see if we'd see anything. They were too far for me to confidently say that they were flying saucers, but did anyone else see multiple? We counted 6 after being out there for only 10 minutes. And it keeps going on and on. I mean, there's tons of replies to that, all these sightings. I don't know. Here's another one. Reports are emerging on various social media platforms of a suspected UFO sighting in the night sky. Multiple individuals have shared their accounts describing bright lights, hovercraft-like aircraft, unusual flight patterns, abrupt stops, zigzag movements, and it just keeps going on and on and on and on. There is a couple of obviously fake posts on there, but like I said, I have a feeling that for every fake post, there's at least 2 real ones. So something weird is going on in the skies above Palmdale and Lancaster. It's a little too far for me to just drive up there one night and hang out and stare up in the sky, but something's going on. Alrighty, up next in paranormal news. Nope, I already did that one. Why is that on there twice? Here we go. Pentagon alien hunter. Why I know we're not alone or safe. That's right. Elizondo's back in the news. Let me get to the bulk of the story here. Luis Elizondo has written about his times at the head of a top-secret program to work out what the Pentagon calls unexplained aerial phenomena, or UFOs. It took a year for him to write his autobiography, and it took a whole year, it took a whole year for it to pass the Department of Defense censors after he wrote his autobiography. The book, Imminent Inside the Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs, was obtained by the New York Times and details of Elizondo's experiences as an intelligence officer at the secretive Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program run by the Defense Intelligence Agency. It goes on to say that while much of his time there remains classified, this book does describe how his work came home with him for 7 years. He claims that his D.C. area home was invaded by green, glowing, basketball-sized orbs. They could pass through the walls and appear to be under intelligent control. He writes in this book that his wife, their 2 daughters, and their neighbors witnessed the green orbs, which they called Our Friends From Out of Town. The book, look, I can't wait for this book to come out. My hope is that he'll be doing press for this book, and he's nice enough, hopefully. I've met him once a long time ago, but hopefully he's nice enough that he will do press on Paranormal Almanac, because I'd love to talk to him about his book and just about everything in general. He's an absolutely fascinating guy who's done more for the UFO community, UAP community, than a lot of people have in the past 20, 30 years. Alrighty, up next in paranormal news, this eerie underwater recording could be the Loch Ness Monster, not a monster, heartbeat. Let's see. Volunteer researchers from the Loch Ness Exploration were recently using an underwater microphone to listen for unusual sounds in the murky waters. As part of their efforts to observe, record, and study the natural behaviors of Loch Ness and the rare phenomena that might be more challenging to explain. Yep, Nessie. As you can hear in the video below. I can't wait to hear it. Hold on. I'm going to hit there, skip that.
Right on top.
No, that's not it. Oh, where's the video? Ah, here we go. All right, the video's ready to play. As you can hear in the video below, the hydrophone detected a strange rhythmic pulsing about 100 feet down in the loch. At first, we believed the hydrophone might be getting dragged along the bottom, but the boat skipper confirmed the cable was at least 5 meters from the bottom. You can clearly hear a rhythmic pulsing or heartbeat within the recording. We have no idea what was causing this sound, but it's very interesting. This is the first time hearing the pulse or heartbeat so clearly. Alrighty, I've been wanting to listen to this for a while, so I'm going to play it now. Huh. Boy, that sounds like a microphone being dragged along the bottom of the water. But they said that it wasn't. So with that, yeah, I don't know what it is. Not a clue. Don't have a clue what that noise could be. If it's a heartbeat, Nessie, calm down. It's cool, baby. It's cool. Relax. Alrighty, up next in paranormal news. This is a weird one. See Bigfoot's buttocks imprint in Blue Ridge, Georgia. That's right. If you happen to be in Blue Ridge, Georgia, head on over to the Bigfoot Museum in Blue Ridge, Georgia. They say there are plenty of Bigfoot museums across the United States, like Willow Creek, California, Boring, Oregon, Portland, Maine, and Okeechobee, Florida, but only one has a butt. That's right. There is a buttocks imprint, a Bigfoot buttocks imprint cast by Paul Freeman east of Walla Walla, Washington, May 1993. In May of 1993, east of Walla Walla, Washington, Paul Freeman discovered tracks that led to a sandy bank along the dry creek. The Sasquatch apparently sat down on the edge of an elevated bank and left a distinct imprint of his derriere, which he then cast. Because you gotta, if you find a Bigfoot butt imprint, you either gotta slap it if you don't have the materials to cast it, but if you got the materials to cast it, you gotta cast it. You know he smelled it. Dr. Jeff Meldrum, professor of anthropology at the University of Idaho, noted evidence of a tailbone at the deep natal cleft. The cheeks of the buttocks were prominent and well-muscled, with little no evidence of excess fat. Boy, this sounds like Dr. Jeff was into this. Striations of hair streaming downward and inward across the natal cleft. Look, it's an imprint of someone's ass. If it turns out to be Paul Freeman's ass, well done, sir. Your ass is now in a museum. But if it's legitimately a Bigfoot ass print, well done, sir. I want a mold of it. Like if you sell copies of it, I will gladly, if it's not too expensive, buy a copy of it and put it behind me on the wall. Let's see. This person said, I was lucky enough to spend some time in the North Georgia mountains over the weekend, and Bigfoot's really popular around these parts, while buying some cool Bigfoot earrings from Timber Top Creations at the Blue Ridge, Georgia downtown market. They told me about the nearby museum, must-see museum, featuring Expedition Bigfoot, the Sasquatch Museum. It describes itself as the world's largest Bigfoot museum, containing 3,700 square feet of exhibits and artifacts. It claims to have the nation's largest permanent display of footprint casts. Ooh, I wonder if they want to mold my footprint cast. I should find out. And copy, and the world's only Bigfoot research and tech vehicle on display. I spent a couple of hours perusing the exhibit, which is chock full of Bigfoot sightings from all over the world. Fecal samples, one collected by Dr. Matthew Johnson in 2016. In southern Oregon, is 36 inches long. Books about Bigfoot, newspaper clippings, footprint cast galore, equipment for tracking and recording the creature, loads of eyewitness sketches and accounts, recordings of several Bigfoot creatures talking in their own language, lots of displays, and even the Bigfoot buttocks imprint. I gotta go to Georgia, man. Get me a plane ticket to Georgia. I gotta see this museum. I wonder if they can play. I gotta email this museum and say, hey, if you play music in your museum, please play Love Sasquatch. You can find that on Spotify or Amazon. Thankfully, or unthankfully, no one has actually purchased it. The album on Amazon, but you can go to Amazon, type in Paranormal Almanac, Unwelcome Songs, and if you want to, I think it's like $6.75 or something like that, $6.97. You can buy the album if you want to, or you can just go to YouTube and listen to all the songs, or go to Spotify and listen to all the songs. I don't care, just as long as you're enjoying it. Yeah, that sounds cool, man. I got to check out this museum. It seems like it's got a lot of cool stuff that I would love to spend a day walking through. I don't know when I'm going to get to Georgia or how I'm going to get to Georgia, but now I have a reason to go to Georgia. That's cool. Already up next in paranormal news, the Loch Ness Monster, not a monster, and fascism when Italy claimed to have killed Nessie. This is a weird, bizarre story that I'll probably do a whole episode about, or part of an episode about, when I do the next Nessie episode. So I'm not going to read the whole article. I just had to let you know that 3 days ago in the news, they did a story about Nessie and fascism when Italy claimed to have killed Nessie. That's bizarre. That's a teaser for a future episode. I'll put it that way. With that, let's get right on. Actually, with that, that does it for paranormal news. Let's talk about merch. You can head on over to tpublic.com/stores/paranormal-almanac. I know, it's a mouthful. I don't know why they can't make it easier than that. There are a ton of new designs that I just put out. So it's a great way to support the show if you don't want to be a patron. A patron's obviously the best way. You get extra stuff. You'll get an extra long episode today. But it's a great way to support the show. Helps me to buy stuff for the show. Like, that's how I got this brand new camera that's on order. It's on its way. And helped me to make the show. So thank you to everybody that's bought merch in the past and the future. I'll say it. And in case I time slip right now. And thank you to all of the patrons. I can't do the show without you. Also, if you want to help support the show for free, it's real easy to do. Head on over to youtube.com. Find the Paranormal Almanac channel. Just Paranormal Almanac. I think there might be like an underscore, but it's easy to find. Paranormal Almanac. Click subscribe. Click like on any episode you want. It really helps out. It's shocking how much clicking like helps out. Now I get why people are always like, make sure you click like and subscribe and comment and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it really does boost the viewers or the chance of viewership on all of my episodes. If you click like and subscribe and write a comment. You can also go on over to TikTok and you can follow me on TikTok. I think it's Paranormal Almanac 1 because somebody took Paranormal Almanac on TikTok and then did nothing with it. Plus, you can do, if you happen to be in either Hollywood, California, or Sterling Heights, Michigan, my hometown, for the next week, I won a free digital billboard in 2 locations. So, I won like an amount, so I got 2 locations. So I got a digital billboard. Hopefully, I think, if I clicked it right, if I did it right, it's on the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, which is way cool, and I really hope that's where it's at. It looks like it was according to the map. Anyhow, starting today, August 18th, going for the next 5 days from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. My billboard, my digital billboard will be up there. And in Sterling Heights, Michigan, it's on M59 South and Van Dyke. So, yeah, find the billboard. Go check out, if you happen to be in the area and you're right there and it's not going to cost you anything, go, especially the Sterling Heights, Michigan one, because I won't be able to see that one. Go there, take some photos of the billboard or you in front of the billboard, something. I think it sounds like this is going to be way cool. I can't wait to see it. I have no idea how big these billboards are or how small. Some of the options were like, the cash register little advertisement that pops up for 2 seconds. Well, I'm like, I don't want that. If I'm going to use this free opportunity, I really want to use it. So I think, like I said, and I'm going to go there today, right after I finish this episode. I'm going to do the remote viewing, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then I'm going to get dressed and head on over to Hollywood and see, is it real? Is it really a billboard? It seems like it's a real deal. It didn't cost me anything. It was free. Thank you again to, I think it's Cassie.co. But, yeah, I'm really hoping this is real. I'll blast every social media with photos of me in front of a billboard if this thing is real, and on the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. Seems kind of cool. But as I just prefaced just a second ago, what I'm also doing on YouTube, I'm now doing them in like 2 or 3 day batches, if you will. I'm learning how to remote view. I'm going to do 30 days of remote viewing. Now, I did miss 2 days this week. There was just too much stuff going on between the day job and stuff that I already been committed to. But I'm going to do 30 days total of learning how to remote view. Please, if you want to watch one of the episodes, just one, if you're like, I'll give one episode a try. Episode 13. The day 13 of remote viewing, it's on YouTube. There's something to this, and I don't know what it is. Even though I'm doing it, when it happens, I don't know how it's happening. But I got day 13. Boy, I really hope it was day 13. I think it was. I got day 13, like, spot on. I couldn't tell you what this thing was, but, man, I drew it. I described it. I let myself describe it. The key is don't think. The key to remote viewing is be relaxed, be centered, don't think. One thing that I found that has really worked for me for remote viewing is taking a nap and then doing the remote view. And I think I figured out why, because I'm not good at meditating. I'm too into my own head. Once I start meditating, after like 10 seconds, I start thinking about all the stuff that I need to get done, or the stuff that I need to do, or the stuff that I could do. Or wouldn't it be funny to do a stupid song about my buddy Frank buying a new house? Like that kind of thing. And I can't meditate. But I can trick myself into meditating by taking a nap. I take a nap, I wake up, I'm relaxed, I'm calm, I walk right over from the couch over to here, and I do a remote viewing episode, and it seems to work. I wish I could say, look, if you want a remote view, here's how you do it. But I don't know how it works, even though it seems to be working really well. So watch day 13 of remote viewing. It's on YouTube. It's really fucking weird, man. I don't know what more to say, but it's really weird, and there does seem to be something to it. Now, if I was more disciplined, which I'm not, and you all know that, if I was more disciplined, if I took this more serious, if I spent like an hour meditating every day, I think I could be pretty damn decent at remote viewing. I really do. I think I could learn it and really, really do it. But I just don't have the time, and I definitely don't have the discipline to do it. But it's still really interesting for me to see what I get right, what I get wrong. When I get something wrong, I already know it. It's weird. Like, there was a day, I can't remember, maybe day 9, I think it was, where I was like, it just isn't working. And I knew it wasn't working. But I tried anyway, and I kind of forced myself through it. And you can't force yourself, well, I can't force myself to remote view. So there is something that happens when you get it right, and there's something that happens when you get it wrong. It's really weird. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with Time Slips, Part 2, I think. We are back. You just had a time slip. For you, that was like instantaneous. For me, it was like minutes. I had to take a quick pee break. But for you, boom, instantaneous. As you heard that weird, and then right again, you know, that noise, right again. But there was a time slip that happened. But we're back. If you're a longtime fan of the show, first of all, thank you. You're the best. But you'll know that I love time slips. I think they're way more interesting than time travel, actually. You know, time travel, yeah, sounds great. Love to do it. You build me a time machine. You knock on my door, go, hey, man, here's a time machine. Have fun. Oh, I'm going to use it. Oh, I'm going to go and watch the Beatles rooftop concert. I'm going to go watch JFK assassination. I'm going to go see what happens to me in the future. I'm going to go back and pet Stitch. I'm going to go say hi to my buddy Joe. Definitely. I'm going to do all of these things and then some. So much more. I'm going to go see the Black Dahlia. You know, like there's so many unexplained things that I would like to try. You Jack the Ripper? Psh, yeah, I'll go check him out. I'll take a photo of him. I'll let you know who he is. But as cool as that is, I think time slips are more interesting. And, you know, science has actually looked into them just as much as they've looked into time machines. But the problem is they're all just stories that a person has told. So is any of what they're saying true? Who knows? This is definitely a grain of salt episode. I'm telling you right now. But I tried to get rid of all of the obviously fake stories. I did that for the most part on the first time slip episode forever ago. And I think I did a good job weeding them out on this one. And then there's just some that I'm like, well, I got to go with what these people tell me because they were there and I wasn't. But first of all, I suppose I should say, what is a time slip? In case you're new to this show and you've made it this far, 33 minutes in, wow, thank you. But what is a time slip? A time slip is when someone is walking or driving and all of a sudden they're thrust either minutes, hours, weeks, or more, years, either backwards in time or forwards in time. No time machine, no plan to time travel, no weird green vortex that they kind of stepped into. No, they're just walking and the next thing you know, they're like, whoa, something's weird. And there's usually like a visual or auditory clue that something is a little off, but not always. Sometimes you just, you know, you're walking down the street and you look up and you're like, hey, that house has never been there before, or these shops are all completely different and everybody's dressed like they're in the 40s or the 60s or the 1800s. There's no plan to time travel. It just happens. And then, just as instantly as it happens, they're back in their own time. You know, it's time traveling by accident, basically. So that is the overall nutshell of what time slip is. But what about some theories on how this happens? One of the theories, it's called the inflation theory, and it doesn't just deal with time slips. It deals with our universe completely. Basically, it's just like Marvel or Sliders or Fringe, you know, like before Marvel. We're talking about the multiverse, basically. And the inflation theory has some science crap to back that up. So you know how, you all know what the multiverse is. I'm not going to go into that. It's an infinite number of universes existing along different paths in time as ours. There could be an infinite number of you in these infinite number of universes. The theory is that every time you make a decision in your life, you're splitting the timeline. So if right now I decide to get up and walk into the backyard and strip down and drink at the tiki bar instead of doing this show, that's now a timeline. If I decide to go the other way and walk out the front door and just start yodeling at the top of my lungs for people that are walking on the bike path, that's now a different timeline. That Kurt is doing that. So there's infinite timelines. But the inflation theory, where does that come in? It centers on a hypothetical event that occurred when our universe was less than 1 second old. At 1 second old, the universe inflated to become many orders of magnitude larger than its previous size. All right. Supposedly that somehow explains the multiverse, but how does it connect to time slips? Basically, there are thin spots between these universes, or there is something connecting them together, either magnetically, through radiation, through some kind of overlap of these universes. They aren't completely separate. Maybe through the composition of the Earth in that area, or like with the Mandela effect, there's that theory of CERN causing it. It could be something man-made that collapses or connects or changes the universe around a location. Do you get it? I mean, that's the best I can do to dumb down this thing that I can barely understand called the inflation theory. So in my mind, it is a lot like the Mandela effect. That the Mandela effect is all these different timelines that are either merging or overlapping or rewriting each other, but just in a small generalized area, and it doesn't seem to be permanent like the Berenstein Bears. It seems to pop into that one for a minute, I'm now into this separate timeline or the separate universe, or maybe you are legitimately stepping into the past because time is not linear. Einstein taught us that. It's a hodgepodge of crap. So maybe you are just stepping into the past and then stepping back out of it. Now, there are a bunch of other theories, too. Like, according to some researchers, they propose that a certain psychological or physiological condition can prompt individuals to experience a sudden shift in time and space, leading to the sensation of a slip. So basically, they're saying, it's you. It's your brain. You're having a little mental moment, a disassociative moment, and you're not really time traveling, but your brain is making you. Another theory suggests that the phenomena is simply an extreme form of deja vu. Again, possibly a malfunction in the brain's memory system, like a brain glitch or a brain short circuit or whatever. But they're saying in this case, rather than feeling that uncanny sense of, oh, this has happened before, people that time slip feel as they've been transported to a different point in time. I don't really get that one, but I'll keep going. Or another theory says that time slips might be explained by electromagnetic fields. That's right, magnets, electromagnetic fields. Research from Canadian academics show that such energy fields can produce hallucinations by toying with signals in the brain. All right, so this one I can get behind this one. It's very similar to, how like some people think they're seeing paranormal activity at a location, and it just turns out that they're standing next to like a big transformer or a conductor, or they're in a Faraday cage, if you will. And those things, those strong magnetic fields, it's scientifically proven. They can cause you to hear or see things that aren't really there. Now, you go down that rabbit hole, there's a lot of people that say, or is that Faraday cage, that transformer you're standing by, opening your brain up to see everything. So these things are really there. Even though there's a scientific explanation about it, they're saying maybe science doesn't understand that these things are being opened up to you. Because you go down this rabbit hole, and I did. And I've done it before and regretted it. And I did it again for this episode and kind of regret it. You go down this rabbit hole, you'll get people that say, oh, yeah, sure. But you're only seeing, and they all pick a number, 10%. Your eyes can only comprehend 10% of the universe. Or your brain can only comprehend 10%. Or you only use 2% of your brain. Or we can only see certain wavelengths. That one's true. We can only see certain wavelengths. Who's to say that if you step into this electromagnetic field, that's causing you to now see all the wavelengths? And perhaps in those wavelengths are the ghosts, are the different timelines. And again, I can't be like, well, no, you're wrong, you're stupid, because, who knows? You gave me a lot to think about, man, and I'm not even like high or drunk. You're giving me too much, man. Freaking me out. You go down these rabbit holes for too long and anything sounds possible. That's the scary part. It's like, I'm like, well, yeah, you made a good point. That is possible. You know, you put a cattle prod up your butt, just the right spot, turn it on just to the right kind of electrical impulse. Yeah, you're seeing God, baby. I don't know. I can't prove him wrong. I don't want to try and prove him wrong. But again, weird rabbit holes to go down. Let's go on to another theory, though. Another theory is that time slips are caused by cognitive errors, such as confirmation bias alone. In other words, the brain convinces itself of whatever it wants to believe. So if you're walking down the street and you see a guy in like old-timey period clothing, perhaps subconsciously, according to this theory, you might go, whoa, did I go into a time slip, or did I just go back in time? And your brain's like, oh, crap. Yeah, here you go. You did go back in time. And your brain starts filling out that picture for you. They say that guy that you saw in the old-timey clothing is what they call an anchor, upon which the brain then latches onto and gives you this greater illusion that's constructed. That one, I don't think my brain would do. I don't have enough brain power to, like, when I'm walking down the street, I'm usually typically walking with rum, and I'm thinking, I got to feed the squirrels. Oh, look, there's a squirrel. Oh, look, there's a squirrel. And then I feed the squirrels. I'm not thinking, that squirrel looks like an old-timey squirrel. And my brain goes, yeah, now you're in the 1920s in Burbank. Look, here comes Laurel and Hardy driving down the street in their jalopy, Kurt. I don't have enough brain power for that. My brain's just like, yeah, it's a squirrel. It looks like an old-timey squirrel. Yep. And maybe in my mind, it'll play me like some soundtrack from like a 1920s cartoon that's all weird and wacky. But that's about as far as my brain will go. And then my brain's like, I'm too tired. Just feed the squirrels. Let's go back home and take a nap. There's more theories, though. I think this one is a neat theory, suggests that it's not a time slip, but it's you remembering a past life. Like if you lived in that area in a past life and you're walking down that street, there is still some connection to the past life in your brain, in your body, in your soul, whatever, and it can slip you back into that past life memory so you can see the place that you're at from a past life, from the 20s, from the 1800s, from whenever, whatever time you're seeing when you think you slip back to, you're now seeing it as your previous life did. Again, I think that's a neat one. If that's the case, and I guess that could be the case because there's a lot of people that have past lives, like you hear about these kids that like are watching TV or their dad's reading a book and they're like, oh, I used to be a fighter pilot in World War II in Germany. But they live in like Kansas. So maybe if that kid was walking down that street in Germany that his past life lived in, he might go, oh crap, I'm back in 1920s, 1940s Germany, whatever. I think that's a neat one. So there's a lot of theories is what I'm saying. I personally think the electromagnetic one, that one can really explain time slips to me. Because if you remember, you might not remember, there's a guy named Madman Markham. He was on the Art Bell show back in the day a couple of times. He built a time machine using electromagnetics. Basically, he used like electromagnets and conductors and all this. He was like an electrician, so he knew how to safely do insane experiments with electricity, and basically shot himself through time without a plan. Now, if you believe his story, all he used were expensive but available materials and pumped so much electricity through the magnets that he created a vortex that caused time travel. So, if you keep going down this electromagnetic energy rabbit hole, if there is enough electromagnetic energy in a certain location, then that theory suggests it might be enough to cause someone to time slip, to transport in time without knowledge, only in a certain area, though, in a certain spot, that when you leave that spot, you are then transported back to your original time. I mean, there's a lot of blank, empty spaces. I'm with you. I'm right there with you. I know you're going, well, that doesn't explain how they're moving through time or through a different parallel universe. Look, listeners, I don't have the answers. I've done the research. I don't have the answers. And trust me, don't go down these rabbit holes. I mean, you can if you want to, but if you go down the rabbit holes, take everything these people say with a grain of salt and don't follow any of them implicitly, because I think some of these people online are crazy. I'm going to say it right now. I think some of these people online are going to hurt themselves trying to build a big enough electromagnet to time slip. But hey, maybe that's how people go missing. They're like, I'm going to finally build a time machine, and boop, and they build a time machine, but it just looks like a big electromagnet, or it looks like you've just been playing in your garage with a bunch of wires, and people don't know that you built a time machine, and then you're back in time or forward in time. Good on you. So remember, lots of theories. Let's make with the stories. Remember, grain of salt these stories, and let's slowly dip our toe into time slips for this episode. For this first one, we go back to Oklahoma in the 1970s. Now, depending where you get your information or this story from online, sometimes the three workers have names, like Carl and Greg and Steve or something dumb like that. I tried to go back as far as I could. I can't prove that this story is from the 70s, and I also can't prove that this story was just made up on like some fiction Reddit thread or something. But the original, as far as I can tell, story does not have the workers' names. It just says that three workers were picking up cattle feeder equipment from a farm in Oklahoma in the 70s and noticed a white house on the property. Like a big white farmhouse. And they're like, whoa, that's weird. I've never seen that big white farmhouse before. Whatever. When they came back the next day, however, the house was not only not there, but when they walked up to the house, or where they thought the house was, there was no sign of it ever being there. No foundation, no rubble, no nothing. It was just never there. It just never was in this spot. They said it was close enough by. They all three saw it. They all three talked about the fact, did you see that house? What did you see? And they all described the exact same house. One day, completely there. One day, not. And it reminds me of a story that I'm going to kind of butcher, but it reminds me of a story that Todd and Jamie told me. They saw a building one day and went, oh, that's weird. They must have built something right there. I didn't know they were building, blah, 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 construction. We must have missed it. And then they drove by like a week later, nothing there. No building, no evidence that there was something there. The story is much more exciting than that, but I'm 50 minutes into this episode, so I can't recall it. Pardon me. But Todd and Jamie, you can tell that story next time you're on the show. Was it a time slip? Who knows? Alrighty, next one. We go to Kent. On the morning of June 18th, 1968, this woman, her name was Miss Charlotte Warburton, said that she went shopping with her husband in town in Kent. When they went shopping, he was like, all right, you go do your thing. I'm going to hang out here and wait for you. We'll meet later. So she said that she went looking for a particular brand of coffee. She went to her usual grocer in a supermarket on Calverley Road. But she said when she walked into the shop, she's like, oh, I saw a small cafe through an entrance in the left-hand wall. And she's like, oh, I never realized there was a cafe there before. She said it was rather old-fashioned with wood-paneled walls. And she said there was no windows, and the room was lit by a number of electric bulbs with, quote, frosted shades. She's like, at the time I thought nothing odd, other than I'd never noticed that little cafe before, but whatever. And she said that even though she didn't think anything was especially odd, she did see two women in rather long dresses sitting at one table, and about a half a dozen men, all in dark lounge suits, were sitting at the other tables further back in the room. She said all the people seemed to be drinking coffee and chatting. She's like, it seemed normal for, Kent at 11 o'clock in the morning. She said that she didn't stay. She didn't recognize anything weird. Then, let's see. Even the clothing didn't seem very odd to her. She's like, I did notice that there was no noise from them, but she's like, I didn't smell any coffee. I didn't hear any sounds coming from that cafe, but I was busy. I was focused on my own thing. I really didn't think about it. And she kept going about her day. So she goes to meet her husband. Let's see. They go to Tunbridge Wells on their next shopping stop. And she was talking to her husband about that cafe. And she's like, oh, you know what? I'm going to take him there. So she goes, you know what? We go to this other shop. Oh, she was trying to go to another shop, basically. The way she words this story is really difficult to follow her. She goes back. She's like, all right, screw it. We can't, you know what? A coffee sounds good. She's talking to him about a coffee. She's like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's go back to that cafe. So they go to the place. They search up and down the street, and there's just no cafe. And they're like, well, that's really weird. So they go up to the people in the supermarket that the cafe was connected to, and we're like, hey, I saw a cafe. What's going on? And they were like, there's no cafe. You're probably in the wrong building. And she's like, it was then that they learned about the Cosmo Kinema, K Kinema, which had stood on the site of the supermarket. She's like, okay, what's that? So they go to the Tunbridge Wells Constitutional Club, where the steward told them at one time the Constitutional Club had owned the premises adjoining the Cosmo, which is now the supermarket. And that club had an assembly room in those days. To the rear, it was a small bar with tables for refreshments. And they go to describe perfectly the cafe that she saw. She was actually finishing his sentences about what she saw, what it looked like. And they said that the bar, the cinema, the assembly room, everything was gone decades ago. So she time slipped, basically. She saw the cinema, or the cafe, I should say. It's called a kinema. I don't know why it's called a Cosmo Kinema. She saw the cafe. She saw the cafe that used to be there decades before. And when she actually went back and thought about it, that's when she kind of pieced together, oh yeah, they were wearing odd clothing. The women were wearing odd clothing dresses from like decades before. And the men were wearing odd suits that were decades before. And I couldn't hear their voices, and I didn't smell the coffee. And that's when she started piecing it together, like, yeah, this is kind of odd. What the hell happened? But she goes on to say she doesn't believe in the paranormal. She doesn't believe in ghosts. She doesn't believe in any of this stuff. Yet, she couldn't explain what she saw the morning of June 18th, 1968. Now, I'll pause here for a second to say there are a lot of people online that say something happened in the 90s that seemed to kind of wrap up time slips. Like time slip stories from like the 50s to the 90s were huge and everywhere, but they're slowly trickling away. Yeah, trickling away. And they don't know what happened in our society that would cause that, but that time slip stories are becoming fewer and farther between. I don't know if I believe that, because I could find a ton of them relatively current up until like the 2000s. Alrighty, up next, we go to October 1979, Dover, England. Two couples, I'll get you their names in a second. They go off on vacation together. They intend to travel through France and Spain. Their names were Jeff and Pauline Simpson and Len and Cynthia Gisby. They said they boarded a boat that took them across the English Channel to the coast of France. There, they rented a French car and proceeded to drive north. At around 9:30 p.m., October 3rd, they got tired, and they began to look for a place to stay for the night. They said they pull off the route, and they find this kind of nice-looking motel. So they go into the lobby, and he says they encountered a man dressed in an odd plum-colored uniform. The man said there are no rooms in the motel, but there was a small hotel along the road, going south along this same road. They went, all right, cool, thank you. And they get back in the car. They start driving. They said that they were struck by the oddness of the cobbled, narrow road and also the buildings that they passed down this narrow road. They also saw posters advertising a circus. They said it was a very old-fashioned circus on the posters. And she's like, oh, that's kind of neat. I wonder what that old-timey circus is about. Finally, they get to a small, long, low building with a row of brightly lit windows. They said that they saw some men standing in the front of it, and Cynthia's like, oh, hey, how's it going? And they told her this place was an inn, not a hotel. They're like, ah, crap. So they get back they stay in the car and they start driving again down the road until they find two small buildings. One, a police station. The other was a 2-story bigger building. It's an old-fashioned 2-story building bearing a sign that just marked hotel. They said, looking through the windows, inside everything was made of heavy wood. No tablecloths on the table. No evidence of like telephones or elevators or anything like that. But they're really tired. They didn't care. Fine, let's go stay at the hotel. So they do. They go in. They said the rooms were weird. The bed had heavy sheets and no pillows. There were no locks on the doors, only wooden catches. The bathrooms had to be shared, that they had to share. They had one bathroom between them. They had to share. It had an old-fashioned plumbing in it. So they get downstairs. They eat. They go to the rooms. They go to sleep. When they awaken, they said they noticed that's when the sunlight filtered through the windows, and it consisted of only wooden shutters, no glass. They go back to the dining room. They eat a simple breakfast with black and horrible coffee, Jeff says. And as they're sitting there, a woman wearing a silk evening gown and carrying a dog under her arm sat opposite them. Pauline thought, hey, that's strange. It looked like she had just come in from a ball, but it was 7 a.m. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. Then, two gendarmes. Oh, my God. I looked it up earlier and I already forgot how to pronounce it. Hold on. I want to make sure so people don't get mad at me. Gendarmes? Wait, hold on.
Gendarmes.
Gendarmes. There we go. French police. Two gendarmes, French police, enter the room. But Jeff said, they were nothing like the gendarmes we saw anywhere else in France. Their uniforms seemed to be really old. They were deep blue, officers wearing capes over their shoulders. Their hats were large and peaked. They went, all right, well, this is kind of weird, whatever, blah, blah, blah. They said they enjoyed themselves nonetheless. They returned to their rooms. The husbands separately took pictures of their wives standing by the shuttered windows, kind of a little memento of this odd place that they had stayed in. And on their way out, Len and Jeff talked with one of the gendarmes about the best way to take the auto route to Avignon and the Spanish border. They thought that the officers reacted kind of odd. They didn't seem to understand the word auto route, but they thought, oh, we must have mispronounced the French word properly. So they kind of just described what they want to do and where they want to go. And the gendarmes were like, oh, okay, cool. And gave them directions. And they said the directions they were given were quite poor. They took the friends to an old road some miles out of their way. They decided to use the map instead that they took with them, and they found a more direct route along the highway. So after the car was packed, they pay their bill, and Len said that he was astonished when the manager asked for only 19 francs. Assuming he again misunderstood the French, he said there were 4 of them, they'd eaten a meal. Manager nods. Len showed the bill to the gendarmes, who smiled, indicating there was nothing amiss. He paid in cash and left before they could change their minds. I'm hoping he left them a big-ass tip. Anyhow, on their way back from 2 weeks in Spain, they decided to stop at the hotel again. They thought, it was weird, it was fun, whatever, let's go back to that same spot. They, for 19 francs, why the hell not, right? They said that the night was rainy, it was cold, visibility was poor. They found the turnoff, And then they saw the circus signs. They're like, all right, we're on the right road. Here we go. Let's go back to that hotel. They start driving. No hotel. They went, all right, we must have missed it. So they go back to the motel where that guy in that weird plum-colored suit was. And there was a motel. That motel was there, but there was no man in the unusual suit. And the clerk denied such an individual ever working there. So they're like, all right, well, we found this motel. We know where the turnoff is. We know where those circus posters are. Let's drive back and forth and find this hotel, this cute little hotel. They said that they actually drove 3 times up and down the road, and they were like, there's no hotel. Okay, now they're really tired. They say, screw it. They drive and spend the night in a hotel in Lyon, and they said that it was a very modern hotel. Breakfast and dinner cost them 247 francs. Yeah, so they get back to Dover. Remember, they took photos when they were at that tiny, weird hotel, the Timeslip Hotel. So Jeff and Len had their own, remember, separate photos, separate cameras. So they have their film developed because they want to see photos of the vacation. In both cases, both Jeff and Len's cameras, the pictures of the hotel, one by Jeff, he said, Len said he took 2, were in the middle of the roll of film. When they got the pictures back, the ones taken inside the hotel, never there. Even weirder, there were no spoiled negatives or black pictures where they should have been. They said that each film had its full quota of pictures. It was as if the pictures had never been taken, except for one small detail that a reporter from Yorkshire Television would notice years later. He said, there was evidence that the camera tried to wind on in the middle of the film. Sprocket holes on the negative showed damage. So it did. They took the photo and wind it on. Took the photo, wind it on. So where are these photos? What happened to the time slip photos? Now, the other thing that I like about this story quite a bit is that they didn't come forward right away. They would talk about their, what happened to them in this weird hotel to like friends and family, but they didn't ever try to become famous off of this. They never tried to write a book or go to the police or the press or be like, hey, we time traveled, or because they didn't know what the hell happened. They just thought it was a really weird, funky experience, but they also didn't want the stigma of the paranormal. So they get this. One of his friends, after hearing the story, found a book and showed him the gendarmes' war uniforms described that Glenn and that Jeff and Len described. He's like, hey, look, here's those gendarmes in those uniforms. They only wore those uniforms prior to 1905. Then, when word did get out, another reporter for the Dover newspaper, he said he looked into it. Everything they described would have been from around or prior to 1905. In 1985, Manchester psychiatrist Albert Keller actually hypnotized Jeff Simpson to see if he could recall any more events. But under hypnosis, nothing new was added. Now, here's the thing. This is a huge, popular time slip story. There's a forum devoted to this very time slip story, and people have spent way too much time verifying the time the sun went down, which matched what they said, the route they took, the possible locations of the hotels based on the trees, and more. Like, okay, if the trees were like a little bit shorter, this is what they would have saw. If they were seeing posters here, this is where they would have to have been, exactly right here. If they saw these kind of cobbles, it would have to have been right here. People have spent way too much time. In fact, here's just one example of the work people are doing to either prove or debunk this story. Look, based on all the posts I read, and it was a lot, like 116 pages in one forum, some say it was a mistaken hotel in another part of the area, or that it was just run down. Others say the hotel exists today and would have looked like they saw it back in 1905, 1900s, 1890s. But here's this one post. I have discovered a possible new contender for the Gisby Simpson Hotel. It is located south of Montelimar on RN7. Yet, according to Google Maps, it is just an 18-minute drive from the Ibis Hotel, formerly Motel, that we now know to be their starting point. So they figured out that motel with a weird plum-colored dude in the suit, the dude in the weird plum-colored suit. They figured out that was the Ibis Hotel. Back in the day, it was the Ibis Motel. They know that's their starting point. They say what is exciting is that an old, seemingly abandoned hotel with just a single hotel sign, as per the description given by the Gisbys and the Simpsons. It also has one shuttered window, partly open. On Google Earth, I cannot see any sign of glass. Furthermore, it is opposite of what might be the remains of a filling station that is now used as a lorry park. It is located on the Route N7 at the junction with the Quai du Devez Minor Road. They actually give a link. They say the address is 1555 N7, 26780, Châteauneuf-de-Rhône, France. So they went and found this flippin' hotel that this couple stayed in, apparently time slipping back to the 1900s. That's cool. People got way too much time on their hands, but that is cool. So here's some time slip with some confirmation years and years and years, decades later. All right, I like that one. I can see why that is a very popular time slip story. And yeah, man, like 19 francs for everything, breakfast and a room and kind of crazy weird story. Sounds cool as hell to me. I want to stay there. Alrighty, up next. By the way, none of them are going to really beat that one, especially with like evidence that people have found later on. I'm telling you right now. I am kind of confused. Before I move on to the next one, I wonder what happened to the photo. Like, there's a few things I wonder. What happened to the photos? How come there wasn't even like blank pictures or anything? Does that mean that, you know, if you do time travel, you can never take a picture? It just won't work? If so, that would explain why there's not more evidence of time travel. And the other thing is, he said he paid cash for that 19 francs. Did he use like 1970s money? And wasn't the guy like, what the hell what money are you giving me right now? It says 1970 on it. It's 1890. How come there was no like, what is this? Hey, gendarmes that are right there. These guys are trying to pay with obviously fake money. Or did they ever like pull out a credit card? Or did anybody ever say, your clothes are weird? What is that? A camera? That's not a camera. Or like anything. How come there was no like, these people look weird, sound weird, are carrying weird things, and have weird money? You know, I'm not asking you for answers. I'm just throwing it out there as to things that make me go, Alrighty, up next. My partner Andy is the most logical man you'll meet, but something strange happened to him more than 40 years ago that he still struggles to explain to this day. He says, in 1977, when I was 5 and my sister was 7, we were staying with my great aunt in the old Norfolk house. It dated back to the 1600s. We woke very early and went to the living room where we saw the fire lit and an old woman in a long dress and cap using a spinning wheel. She looked up, but didn't say anything. Oh, wait, hold on. All right, we'll stop right there. Pause right there. There was no, like, the people were silent in that hotel. There was no, the people were silent or the coffee didn't have any smell. They said it was normal. Everybody was normal. They were talking to people. They were having conversations. Anyhow, sorry, back to this guy. Old woman, long dress, cap, using a spinning wheel. She looked up but didn't say anything. Thinking she would make their breakfast, the children walked into the kitchen, but it was dark. When they went back to ask her, she had vanished. He said the fireplace was cold. And when we told the adults later, they said the home help hadn't arrived yet. That's weird. So he saw somebody, an old woman, in front of a fire, in a long dress and cap using a spinning wheel. But when they walked back into that room, she was gone. The fireplace was cold. Yeah, that's cool. Alrighty, up next. See, I told you, not all of them are going to be long and crazy. Just weird time slips. In the 18... Well, how does that guy know it wasn't a ghost? That could have been a ghost. And again, maybe time slips explain ghosts. Who knows? In the 1980s, Carolyn Anders, now 57, moved to Devon to work for the NHS. She said one weekend a colleague drove her to Plymouth for a party. They went around a roundabout on the approach to the city, and she said she remembers seeing a beautiful church. She said the windows were full of color from the light streaming through the stained glass, and as we passed through the front doors, I saw a large congregation. She's like, I clearly saw everything. She was the only one in the car that seemed to have noticed it. But a few weeks later, when her boyfriend Phil suggested a Saturday out on the Plymouth Hoe, she's like, perfect. As they drove past that same roundabout, she said, I literally cried out because the church was in ruins. I said, oh my God, what happened? Do you know what happened? What happened to this beautiful church? And that's when Phil was like, that's Charles Church. It's one of the oldest in the area. It was bombed during the Second World War. He said that the church had been left as a memorial for the dead. That's cool. Again, weird time slip. Didn't mean to time slip, and yet there you are. That's way cool. Let's go on to the next one. Matt Davies. I used to know Matt Davies. I grew up near him and Kurt Davies. Matt Davies, 50, from Stourbridge in the West Midlands. Okay, not the same Matt Davies. He said he had a weird encounter last November. I'm sure this isn't last November. I'm sure it's from like 2019. He said, nothing like it has ever happened to me before. I was cycling down a canal about 9:30 a.m. when I saw a young guy sitting on the lock gate in what looked like Victorian working class clothes. He was smoking a pipe and staring into the water. He didn't look up as I went past. He said, that's weird. He thought about it more and more. The more he thought about it, the more he wanted to go down the rabbit hole. He found the exact spot on Google Earth, and he discovered that the canal cottages opposite were the scene of an unsolved murder in the early 20th centuries. He was like, look, it could have been a guy who just does historical recreations, but he looked a bit young for it, and there was nowhere open then, and there was nowhere open then in the lockdown. Oh, this is actually really new. This was during the pandemic. So yeah, was it a ghost? Was it a time slip? Who knows? Are they one and the same? It's all getting more and more confusing. Alrighty, we're going on to the next one. Compton Castle in Devon. There's a woman that said she saw a knight in armor walk past her. She said it was clear and real as everyday life. She was at Leeds Castle in Kent. Her name was Alice Pollock. Oh, no, there's two people. That's one woman. She saw at Compton Castle in Devon. She saw a knight in armor walk past her, said it was clear as day. Then another castle incident happened at Leeds Castle in Kent. Her name is Alice Pollock. She reported a room suddenly changed in appearance, and she saw a tall woman in white pacing. She later discovered that Queen Joan of Navarre had been accused of witchcraft and imprisoned in that room in the 15th century. Again, I'm thinking ghosts, man. I guess it's hard to say. If it's solid, real as day. Look, I think that time slips can explain a lot of ghost encounters. I really do. Because there's those encounters where you see someone in like Victorian clothing and they look just as startled as you look. Yeah, that could easily be a time slip. For all you know, they've spent the next 10 days talking about a ghost in weird clothes that they saw, and it happened to be you, you know? All right. Let's see. A bunch of these are from articles about time slip, and in the comment section, these are people going, oh, hey, I had a time slip, and this is their story. When I was 13, I spent my summer holiday, as usual, in the English countryside and used to cycle from the village where I was staying to the local town. We usually did this journey by car, and I was amazed about how much more detail I noticed it from a bicycle. This particular day, I spotted a small village or hamlet in the trees to one side of the road, together with a small church or chapel. I thought, oh, that's really pretty. I'd never noticed this small group of buildings before, and I'm going to on my way back on my bicycle, I'm going to go through there and have a look. But as I cycled back later, the houses I could still clearly see through the trees But due to the lateness of the day, I was like, all right, even though I can still see that place and I want to check it out one day, I'm going to go home. So a day or so later, I passed along the road with my mother in her car, and I was like, oh, I'm going to point out the village to her that I saw. And he noticed there's no village there. He got really concerned, so he went back there, got on his bicycle later on that day, went back there and looked again and again. He said for several days, but to my confusion, could find no trace of either a village or any group of buildings or a farm that I might have mistaken for a small village. He said, I even checked out a recent ordnance survey map, and it didn't show any building or buildings that could have explained what I saw. In the end, I just assumed I was mistaken and somehow misremembered what had happened, even though I knew I was right. Cut to 20 years later for this guy. I was in the local pub about 3 miles up from the road where this had happened, and I came across a Victorian ordnance survey map of the area and just happened to be looking at it when I saw a ruined village and a church marked where I had seen the houses about 20 years earlier. The site of the village was no longer shown on more modern maps, but this older map showed quite clearly the site of a small village and a church. That is cool. Wonder what would have happened if they managed to get to that small town. Like if it wasn't too late and they actually went to the small town. See, that's my problem with time slips. I want a time slip. I want to see a time slip really bad, but I don't want to get trapped in the 20s or the 1800s or whatever. If I had rum with me, I'd be slightly more inclined to be like, oh, well, fuck it. I'll just live my life out in the 1800s. But I don't know how I would live my life out in the 1800s. I am not prepared to live in the 1800s or even the 1920s, for God's sakes. And I talked about this years and years ago with a buddy of mine, Kevin, at a bar one day. And I said to him, I'm like, then it's since has I realized it turns into arguments really quick. So I don't bring it up as much as I used to. But like 10 years ago, I was at a bar. I was at Bigfoot Lodge, actually, with my buddy Kevin, who I'm going to see later today, actually. And I said to him, like, hey, man, what would you do if you're walking down the street and you time slipped to the 1920s? Or I said the 1940s at that time. I said you time slipped to the 1940s. What would you do? And he's like, oh, I would bet on the Yankees to win the World Series that year, and I'd be rich. And so, me being a dick, I Googled it, and I went, like, you would have lost. You don't have any money. You don't have anything. I don't know enough about history to be like, yeah, I'll invest in Apple stock and Disney stock. Yeah, me too. But that's in the 70s. This is the 1940s or the 1920s, whatever. You got 50 years from the 1920s to the 1970s. I don't know what to invest in. I don't know what to do. I don't have skills. I don't have any skills that would help me. Like, I would try to be an actor, sure, because, back then, people weren't the best actors. And I'm sorry, I love old movies as well, but they weren't the best actors. So I think I could probably do that, but maybe not. Like maybe I'd just be an extra in a Three Stooges cartoon. And then for you guys, I just disappear one day and you happen to be watching a cartoon or a Three Stooges show. And you're like, wow, that guy in the background looks like Kurt. That's weird. Oh, he's got a dog like Rum. That's weird. But that'd be the only connection, Like, I since have stopped asking what would happen if you just time slipped back to the 1920s. What would you do with life? Because again, it just leads to arguments. I think Kevin and I actually had a little bit of a row that day. I remember, and I'm thinking, this is drunk talk, man. It's not real. Relax. So what would you guys do? I'm going to pause right here to ask you guys. And for the patrons, I'm going to tell you some more stories in just a minute. But I'm going to pause right here to ask, what would you guys do if you time slipped today back to the 1920s? Wherever you happen to be in life right now in the world, you are walking down the street that you walk down every day, and all of a sudden, whoop, you're back in the 1920s. Permanently. Not in a minute you're going to slip back, but permanently in the 1920s. Or if you do time slip, grab everything you can see, newspapers, any evidence that you time slipped, so that when you walk back into today's time, you have evidence of it, because nobody ever has evidence of it, and that drives me crazy. Alrighty, let me keep going for the patrons. I've got a lot of stories. For the regular listeners, you can head on over to patreon.com for $1 You can hear this whole episode and a bunch more exclusive episodes. But for you regular listeners, I'll be back in just a little bit. Patrons, let's keep on keeping on. All righty, let's bring let's bring the regular listeners back into this part of it, because I want to talk more about Bold Street. For you regular listeners, you just missed about a half hour of really cool stories, including a bunch of cool Bold Street stories. But let's talk about Bold Street for a little bit, and then let's wrap this up. We're going to Bold Street in Liverpool. Bold Street in Liverpool has got a lot of time slips. In fact, it seems like if you really want to experience a time slip, that's your place to be. Now, there's a lot of people that think there's a good reason why Bold Street has these time slips, and it has something to do with the underground train, the tube that runs under Bold Street. There's a lot of bullshit stories online that says that under Bold Street, the tube actually runs in in 3 concentric circles, very much like the CERN, they say. One thing is, the CERN isn't 3 concentric circles, and the tube under Bold Street does not run in concentric circles. That's bullshit. But there might be some connection between all the time slips in Bold Street and the tube. I can't prove it otherwise, so sure, that's a good possible explanation. But there are people that have walked down Bold Street and say they walk onto the 1960s, the 1950s, the stories you just heard a minute ago, patrons. But some walk back to the Victorian era, and they have no idea why, but they can step back into regular time by literally stepping off the street. From there, we go to the 1990s in Bold Street. There was a woman who had a really bizarre, numerous encounters on Bold Street. Let's see. Her name is Julie French. She said that she was shopping on Bold Street when she experienced a time slip back to probably the 1940s. She said, at first, I thought it must have been a promotion or something to do with the war. She was in her 20s. She's been talking about it for 30 years in depth, and she's had more than one incident there. She said, but I looked down at the floor. The pavement seemed to go darker. I turned around, and as I looked up Bold Street, I saw about 12 or 13 people walking by, all dressed in 1940s coats and hats. What was even more significant was on that day, it happened to be June of 1996. It was warm. I was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, but the people on the street seemed to be in the cold. She's like, that's when I was startled by the sound of an old-fashioned car with the round side mirrors honking its horn and hurtling towards her. Despite the street being pedestrianized, she headed inside the shop where a woman in 1940s-style clothing was manning the till and shaking her head at her. It had the old-fashioned mahogany display cabinets. Everything was dark, which is odd because the shops are normally bright. Then suddenly I saw a bookcase with Dylan's written on it, and a man grabbed my arm. I was back in 1996. So she slipped, and then someone grabbed her and slipped her right back, apparently. Time slipped, and then time slipped right back, apparently. She's like, but I have proof, and that proof is a witness. She said she wasn't alone that day. There was an off-duty policeman. His name is Frank. He was heading into the bookshop to meet his wife, Carol, and also claimed to witness the flashback to the 1940s at that exact time. When asked his independent story, it matched Julie's identically. She's like, that was the first of a few time slips. The first one being 9 months, the second one being 9 months later, again in Liverpool. She was heading to the Abbey National Bank on North John Street in her lunch break when she found herself entering a shop full of baby clothes. She's like, I remember grabbing a little knitted cardigan. When I looked up, there was signs saying 2D, 2 pence and old money. Everyone was dressed in 1960s clothing. And then instantly she was back in a normal time without apparently still holding that baby cardigan. She said a few years later, she had another brief time slip, this time on a train near Waverley Station in Edinburgh. She felt it slow down and assumed they were arriving at the station, but when she went to the door, the carriage suddenly looked different. There'd been lots of people on board, but there's only been maybe 3 now. I can only see the back of their heads, and the carriage looked older. I peered out the door, and I was shocked to see a station that was really old, and everyone was dressed in early 1900s clothes. She's talked to a bunch of people in the paranormal community, and they all seem to think she has one foot in this dimension, and for some reason, another foot in a different dimension. She said, I had a bunch of little slips since then. She's like, it is odd that people say that maybe the time shifts in Bold Street are linked to the trains and underground railroad stations, because every time I've had slips, there have been train lines there. She said that she talked to somebody who had a time slip at the exact same spot on Oxford Street branch of HMV in the 1990s. They saw London in the Victorian period. They witnessed horse-drawn carriages, cobbled streets, even experienced the smells of Victorian London. That must smell terrible. Let's see. Let's keep going on. Let's stick with Bold Street for a second. Bold Street, 1997. A man named Andrew Mackenzie experienced a time slip at Piccadilly Circus in London. He said that he reported the area as it appeared in the 1940s with old-fashioned vehicles and people in period clothing, but he said the experience only lasted a few minutes before, poof, he's back in the present day. Sticking with Bold Street. Linda, Bold Street, 1990s. She said, I stepped out of Central Station. Oh, no, this is one that I just told a second ago. Sorry. You have to be a patron to know that one. I'm not gonna repeat that one. So let me get rid of that one right away. If you want to know what that one was, that Linda story, you got to be a patron. This next one says, I've seen one of these time slips and can't get a first-hand account. I can give a first-hand account. When I was 20, so about 24 years ago, I was making my way through Liverpool to see my girlfriend. I needed to catch a train from Central Station, which is right in the area of Bold Street. So I walked down the large ramp that led from Bold Street, you can see it on Google Street Views, into the station and towards the entrance at the far end. Casually glancing around, I really wasn't paying much attention. A man on my mission, you know. My lady was waiting, he says jokingly. I shot the look to the right and registered something odd straight away. My pace slowed down, though I kept walking. There on the right was a cafe coffee shop that had sprung up out of nowhere. At the time, I thought it was odd, as my girlfriend and I often went places around here, and only the other day we walked down the same ramp, and that cafe was definitely not there. They hadn't been working on any such shop there either. There was no construction. To make it even stranger, everyone in the shop and the few that were sat outside were all dressed in old-timey clothes. I'm guessing early 1900s. The woman that I saw were wearing large hats and looked very out of place. My first thought is something being filmed. Maybe it was a special day. Boy, you guys are really mellow in London. Oh, it must be something filming, or it's a special holiday. So he said, I went, oh, that's weird, and kept on going on. I had to get to where I was going. I glanced ahead to make sure I wasn't going to walk into somebody, and when I immediately looked back, the cafe was gone. That is cool. Let's do a paranormal news time slip. What the heck? Why not? Regular listeners, you can hang out for this one. For this one, we go to the Smithsonian Magazine, if it stops giving me a million pop-ups. When three British boys traveled to medieval England, a 1957 time traveler recalls a feeling of unfriendliness and unseen watchers would send shivers up one's back. Let's see. Three Royal Navy cadets were out walking in the rural heart of England. Boy, this is terrible. For Sunday morning in 1957, they noticed that there was no phone lines, no cars, no nothing. It seemed odd on this street that they had just stepped into. They said it looked ancient. They were ragged, hand-built, timber-framed, almost medieval in appearance, they all thought. So they walk up to the nearest building and they press their faces to the grimy windows. They could see that it was some sort of butcher's shop, but what they glimpsed in the interior was bizarre. There were no tables or counters, just 2 or 3 whole oxen carcasses, which had been skinned and in places were quite green with age. There was a green painted door with windows and smallish glass panes, one at the front and one at the side, rather dirty looking. I remember that as we looked through the window in disbelief at the green and moldy green carcasses, the general feeling was disbelief. They said, who would believe that in 1957 the health authorities would allow such conditions? So they peer into the next place. It too had greenish, smeary windows, and it too appeared uninhabited. They said it was crudely whitewashed. The rooms were empty. The boys could see no possessions, no furnitures. They thought the room themselves must not be of modern-day quality. They start to freak out a little bit, and they climbed a small hill to get out of this weird-ass town with this weird shit, no people. And then one of the three remembered, suddenly we could hear the bells once more and saw the smoke rising from the chimneys. None of the chimneys were smoking. We're in the village. We ran for a few hundred yards because we were that scared. Let's see. They talked about it to the parents. They pointed out on the map. They were in the picturesque Suffolk village of Kersey. And they said that there's no possible way that there was a ghost village. It was a bustling town, this town Kersey. Let's see. They said that they talk about this instance often. In the 1980s, they were talking about it again. Let's see. They were intrigued. They looked up what Kersey would have looked like 100 years prior, and it was the town that they had described. All right, that was cool. I liked it. Finally, let's get to this. We're almost at 2 hours. That's plenty of time for an episode. Finally, here's some quotes of how people felt when they experienced time slips. In case you want to know, in case you have that, did I just time slip? Go through this. Did you feel like this? In 1941, Southwest England, they both felt an overwhelmingly sense of foreboding or evil as they climbed hedge after hedge, always dropping down into plowed fields with no gateways. So they felt dread on that one, that something was off, something was off, basically. Something was unnatural. The 1957 one, the Kersey one I just did, they had the general feeling certainly was of disbelief and unreality. Again, something felt slightly off, and the hues were slightly off. That's important. Go back to all of the Bold Street ones. There was something different about the sun. The sun looked different. 1988 in Leeds, England, it seemed very gray and eerie. This next one, sound seemed off. Sometimes there was no sound, other times it was muffled. So again, there does seem to be, from everybody that's time slipped, something is slightly off. The time of the season, the sun, the weather, the temperature, the sound, the smells, all seem to be off. What does that mean for you in time slipping? I have no idea. If you time slip, for the love of God, if you genuinely, you're like 100%, I must have just time slipped. Get some evidence, anything, bring it back with you. Definitely come back. Don't get me wrong. I don't want you to be time slipped forever, but unless you want to stay there, in which case, don't move and talk to everybody. Talk to everybody. That's the other thing. None of these people really talk to everybody. Talk to everybody. Talk to as many people as you can. Get dates, get specifics, get names of these people that you're talking to. Write it down as soon as you're back into your own time. Once again, I'm your host, Kurt Sandvik, and this has been another edition of Paranormal Almanac Time Slip.